Now let's talk a little bit about executing the program increment. We've talked about the iterations, and now we have to think about sets of those iterations, where those sets come together to build a larger system that also is built in an incremental fashion. Here's a picture that shows a series of events and kind of an inner loop and an outer loop. Here's the inner loop. Here's what a single team does. They do their daily stand-up and some amount of backlog refinement and demo and retro, and they keep circulating. So through the course of the PI, they do this 3 or 4 times. At the outer loop, we like to think of this as a broader meeting. The Scrum of Scrums is a well-established meeting of the Scrum Masters. Ours is facilitated by the release train engineer. The PO sync is where the POs get together. They're certainly just as concerned as the Scrum Masters are about progress. And we really often see that as either one meeting or potentially, meetings right next door to each other with a quick meet after, because the Scrum Masters can really facilitate and move process and report on status. The product owners can say, it's okay, we can dump that story, or guess what, here's one that this other team is having a struggle with. Maybe we want to adjust our plans a little bit. Other meetings, release management, the team may or may not be able to deploy and release. Depends very much on the constructs. If you click on release management, you'll see some guidance around how to structure that process and provide the governance that many need to deploy a system. In many environments, you can't simply just ship it. Sometimes you need approval to do that. The system demo, this is the big demo. We're going to talk about that. It's when we really understand how all of those teams contribute to that particular point in time. Some amount of preparation for PI planning, inspect and adapt, which we'll definitely cover, and then back to PI planning that we've already gone through. So let's take a look at a few of those and see some specifics in this process. The Art Sync is where we see the Scrum Masters provide visibility into progress and impediments, and the same goes for the PO Sync, progress, scope, and priority adjustments. So they're involved in progress and things that aren't working well. They're involved in scope and scope adjustments, facilitated by the release train engineer, or potentially the product manager, or potentially it's one single meeting. Participants in the Scrum of Scrums, Scrum Masters, other selected team members, maybe subject matter experts. Participants in the PO Sync, well, you tell me, but clearly the PMs and the POs and occasionally other stakeholders, maybe a customer proxy, maybe a director of product management, product line manager, etc., or subject matter expert. Maybe we're worried about security in this particular case, so we want to know how we're doing in terms of implementing the latest security protocols. Frequency, well, that's certainly up to you. Sometimes we see it weekly. Sometimes more frequently as you approach release boundaries. That's really up to you, and that's really dependent upon your current context. Time boxing followed by a meet after. What do we mean by that? It means that we have to control these meetings into a known envelope. People need to plan. I can enter this meeting at this point and I can get about my day. But there are situations where there are real problems to be addressed. So we want to be able to have time to address those here and here. So typically there's a meet after, which is, okay, you're good to go and you're good to go, but we need to hang out a little bit, or maybe come back together at 3 o'clock and talk a little bit about this new challenge that we have in our system. The meet after is where the real problem solving gets done. Let's talk about the system increment. What is a system increment? The system increment is this box. This is where the increments for all the teams come together. So all the features that each team has been able to develop are integrated into a system increment where those features can be fully displayed. Sometimes more than one team is involved in a feature, sometimes it's just an aggregation of features. This we want to do every 2 weeks. This is the real measure of velocity and progress in the system. And in order to be able to make a good demo, sometimes we have to toggle things on and off. And what we mean by that is my new feature is underway, but it's not complete as of now. So I'd like to demonstrate that feature, but I can't. Well, then we need to toggle it out. We need to put a wrapper around it so that it doesn't interfere with the demo. The new features that are there, they work together, and they work with the existing functionality. It's not adequate to show that this new feature here works great. We have to be able to, run the full regression to show that not only does that feature works great, it didn't break any other feature. And as we talked about, architectural runway may also have to be toggled, scaffolded or toggled or hidden. So I've got this architectural initiative here that I'm working on, this enabler, and it's pretty big and it's taking some time. It's going to take me some time to build that fuzzy search algorithm. Well, I don't want to be broken in the middle. I need to still be able to search at this point for sure. So I may need to toggle that off and say it's not quite working yet. So I've disabled fuzzy search for the purpose of this demo. The system then is continually verified by the story and feature acceptance tests. So the features, as we described, have acceptance tests associated with them. Each one has an acceptance test. each story has its own acceptance test. So now we see a little hierarchy that says the story passed its test, the feature passed its test, and then all the new features are passing their test, and what's more, they're not interfering with the earlier features. Wherever possible, do the non-functional requirements continuously as well. Otherwise, you may have a surprise where you move down the road a little bit and say, okay, the feature worked, that feature worked, that feature worked, that feature worked, but boy, guess what? They piled up and they chewed up a lot of capacity. Each of them is consuming various capacities of the system, and when I get here, I'm running really, really slow. So just we want to assure that wherever we can, the NFR testing is done. Why not all of it? It's not necessarily economically feasible to do all NFR testing at every single increment or every single day. The system demo, so we built this thing, we built this system increment, now let's show it off. We want to take this box and we want to show it to A. Of course, we've done the integration, we've already talked about that. We want to show the full system with some support typically from the system team to the stakeholders at every iteration. This is truly the integrated solution demo. This is the thing that says, this is what we've built in the last 2 weeks. This is our accomplishment. And of course it consists of lots of contributions, but this is the focus of our endeavor. This is our mission, is to build this box, build this pile of value. And that needs to be an integrated demo, of course. Does it happen immediately? Well, you'd hope, but you know, we build complex systems here. So it may lag a little bit, but I will tell you, if that demo lags more than iteration, you're going to get out of sync, because in our simple model of, let's just say, 1, 2, 3, 4 development iterations and an innovation and planning iteration, if I don't get feedback from this iteration until here, guess what? Then I don't get that feedback until there. Now all of a sudden I'm discovering that things I built here don't actually work here. I'm already at the deadline. So consequently, we want to do it a little bit different. We want to make sure, basically set up a simple policy in your organization that says, if this is the iteration, we want to be able to do the demo at least here. Of course, if you can do it here, do it. If you have full continuous integration, you can do it every day or every 6 seconds, that's great. But most of us building big systems have multiple platforms, we have hardware constraints, we have various forms of resource constraints in terms of our demoing capability, et cetera. So we just want to make sure that it happens, and it can lag a bit. But if it lags very much, you're simply going to get out of sync and you're going to end up with a rework loop, and that's going to interfere with your flow and your velocity. Demo from the staging environment, the nearest proxy. What do we mean by that? We mean that you better look a lot like production. So if this is a software system and this is a system, and here's production over here, well, we want to put that thing in that staging environment that I mentioned and make sure that that demo runs here, not just on my desktop or in the team's development testing environments. It runs in the staging environment. And now I'm pretty assured that I've eliminated a whole bunch of the risks and the defects associated with that eventual deployment. We've taken care of that by pushing it to the staging environment, if possible, every single iteration at worst. Now, this last iteration we haven't talked about yet, this innovation and planning iteration, what is it? Well, it serves a multitude of purposes. And I will also tell you that people are nervous about that because they see it and they say, that looks like slack time. Well, you know, there's a body of knowledge that says slack time is actually the most productive time that you have, but I'll ignore that for a second and say it's not just strictly slack time. It's the ability to do some things we couldn't do otherwise. We talked earlier about how we have to have capacity margin to enable cadence. So if this is the delivery time here, then what is this little time box? Well, we're going to do some things for sure, and I'll talk about those, but it also says, wow, if we didn't get it exactly right, okay, we have some capacity margin. Do I want to plan to do maybe some additional, the last few stories, or to do an NFR test that I couldn't otherwise do here? Well, not necessarily. That might be the case. There might be some NFRs that I can only do here, but I certainly want to have the margin. So when I lay out my sprints here, all of a sudden I'm looking at a situation that says I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and by the way, if we're doing well, we're going to have time for innovation, et cetera. But if there are some challenges, we're going to address those in the IP sprint. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So what is the innovation part? The opportunity for innovation spikes and hackathons and infrastructure improvements, the opportunity to clean off your desk a little bit, metaphorically, in your code base or in your hardware solution. Planning. Well, when do we do our planning? We talked before about the fact that the planning isn't optional. We didn't say, hey, there's a framework and you can do your PI planning or not. It takes 2 days. Well, when's that going to be? Well, if I have a standard cadence, where do I put the 2 days? Well, I put the 2 days here, now I have a short sprint. Well, that didn't work very well. So consequently, let's just build it in, and I'll show you in a second a model for that. Let's build that right in to the IP sprint and know that we plan to plan. And there's an estimating guard band. So we don't want to use this for overrun necessarily, but if there is overrun, isn't it fair? Isn't that one of the reasons that we have it? Because we have to have capacity margin in the process. If we want to deliver right here every single time, we know we see some capacity margin. So it's okay to have the estimating guard band. Now, it might mean that, gosh, if we needed it, we really lost our opportunity for hackathons. Well, so be it, pick your poison. But in any case, innovation and planning and estimating guard band are very legitimate functions of that particular construct, the IP sprint. And here's an example of how you can plan ahead. So I know, for example, when our next PI planning session is. It's on my calendar. I'm looking at it. I was looking at it last night. I have to make sure that I'm ready for it and I can participate in that. Prior to that time, maybe there's an opportunity for continuing education. We're working in some areas right now. We haven't actually scheduled that particular meeting, but that'd be a great opportunity because we know our people are going to be together for PI planning. So we might want to work on, some new ways to advance learning architectures or some new ways to think about some of the content that we're putting to the website. Inspect and Adapt, I'll talk about that in a second. So this is week 2, and even then it's not a full week, so there's plenty of other work that can be done. I can be doing other things. But if I'm shipping, this is a great time for validation. We'll talk about validation. Well, I thought we had high quality. We do have high quality, but do we have sign off on all the elements? Have we finished our user acceptance testing? Have we done all the localizations yet? Well, perhaps not. Perhaps it's not economically feasible to do that every single day. Perhaps it is. It depends upon the nature of that particular activity. This is the fun part. Some 2, 3, 4, 5 days. I don't know that I've ever quite seen 5, but I've certainly seen plenty of time allocated to hackathons. A little later in this course, you'll learn a little bit more about this and some of the power of that construct. Spikes for the next PI, what we mean by that? Well, some stuff is upcoming. We have some vision. We have some roadmap. We looked at that a little earlier in the course. So we know that we've got some things headed our way. So let's have some time for spikes. And by the way, we're going to have to get ready for PI planning. We're going to need to update the backlog. We're going to absorb what we've learned through the course of those 4 iterations that brought us here, and let's get ready for planning. And we have Inspect and Adapt scheduled, and then, of course, the PI planning itself. So this is a real breakthrough in terms of scheduling. In a way, this is your program scheduling. Now we know that all those things are going to happen. So we don't have to worry about, is there time for Inspect and Adapt? Of course there is. It's built into the system. Is there time for innovation? Of course there is. It's built into the system. Are we really going to plan? Of course we are. It's built into the system. Are there time for extraordinary validation activities if we're shipping the product? Of course there is. It's built into the system.